Okay, good morning, everybody. I want to express my condolences for those of you who haven't started your spring break already, but we're going to have a very good time here today. We're going to continue reviewing the midterm material, which will also be final exam material. And then I want to take about 15 minutes to look at this film clip, part of a film on the Judy Bari experience at Earth First. And probably in between those two, I'm going to ask John and I guess Sam to talk about the die-in a little bit, see how you experience it. Don't demonstrate it here, but just tell us about it. Is there anyone who wanted to go to a discussion section but were not able to make the times? Okay, so we're going to put this in two piles? Or, yeah, just spread it out, yeah. Okay, so then we have your exams here. They're alphabetical and they're in 4 piles, so I'm going to stop a little bit early. Let's see, Maria, you have to leave early. Come get your exam now. Or it should be right here. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to stop a little bit. If I forget, please tell me. That's the signal. No, it's not. We don't use that in this course. So was there anyone who wanted to go to a discussion section and would be able to do it on Wednesday or Thursday afternoons, not having been able to make it? Okay, Marcela, hay otras? Maria? Okay, Sam? No, discussion section, yeah, for this class. This after spring break, Wednesday afternoons and Thursday afternoons. Or either Wednesday or Thursday.
Please do a show of hands. It's either Wednesday at 4 p.m. or Thursday at 5:15. Raise your hand if you prefer Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Okay.
How about Thursday at 5? I think it's a little more on the Wednesday side, and I prefer that anyway. So
okay.
Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the Oak Grove.
Yeah.
There will be a discussion section.
Yeah.
And if it rains, we'll be moved to High House.
Okay. Okay. And thank you, Matthew, because I know you're getting the same high level of compensation for your work in this course that I am. Where is the Oak Grove? Just follow the police barricades.
It's just in front of Memorial Football Stadium, so you're going up Piedmont Avenue, and High House is on your right. High House is about half a block up.
And soon we won't have to be ashamed of our small Memorial Stadium anymore, although I hope we actually will still be. Okay, so I think we were up to interpretation, and I was, yes, Matt, I'm sorry, yeah, a brief announcement.
Yeah, this Friday, there's people expressing interest in having some type of a social event for class, and so at the Canterbury House tomorrow night at 9 p.m. I'm hosting a little dinner party. So if you have your free, you should come on by. It's right at 2234 Bancroft, just right across the street from Marsat. It's like the old yellow house there. And I'm going to be cooking up a big concert dinner.
Okay.
So, I was wondering, just get like a show of hands, like who would be interested in going there, who thinks they can stop by, sign up for their own map. Yeah, it's tomorrow night. Yeah, 9 p.m.
Okay, good. And I won't be there, so I mean, the lid's off. Well, maybe we'll try and arrange another one later on that I can be at. I'd like to do it. Picnic after spring break. Sounds like a good idea. Nonviolent picnic. Everybody bring your little masks so you don't inhale flies. Things like that. Good. So we were talking about interpretation, and Andrea, was it you that asked me to talk about it some more? You feel pretty set? Okay. It's a good bridge, actually, to the next part of the semester, because we're going to talk about changing the culture, changing the stories, how to get people to think differently. And my feeling has always been that that is a very, very efficient way to make change. And that it's when I said that the interpretation side of the whole shift has been very weak, what I meant was that people get so caught up in the action that they forget the job of explaining to people what that action was and what it meant and how to understand it. And so now more than ever, that could be an extremely powerful leverage to bring about the change. In fact, when we have our open house for Meta, which you're all invited to on April 25th, we're going to have these sort of wallet-sized laminated cards that give you the nonviolent worldview on one side and the basic principles of nonviolent action on the other. So you can just carry that around in your wallet as you're being arrested. You can whip it out. A friend of mine saw part of the hearings yesterday with Al Gore, and apparently there was a very interesting episode that took place that he was being attacked by a senator from a particular political party. The senator has made himself be the point person for exposing the great lie of the liberal media that global warming is happening. And so he was not in a very comfortable position. And not being in a comfortable position, he was very nervous. What do you do when you're nervous? You attack people, right? Unless you're nonviolent. So he was attacking former Vice President Gore pretty enthusiastically. And at one point, Al Gore said, "Senator, I don't think I'm going to be able to explain my concerns to you, but why don't you and I," and he named a mutual friend that they have, "why don't you, I, and mutual friend go out and have lunch, and maybe I'll be able to get across to you there." And immediately the senator, whose name I won't mention, calmed down. It was a real nonviolent interaction in Congress, probably first time since 1778. I think 1778, the first Congress meeting had to be canceled because there was lack of a quorum. But ever since then, from then to now, I think that was probably the first time. So I felt very good about that. And that was, if you will, on a very small scale, I usually wouldn't use the term for this, but on a very small scale, you could call that a nonviolent moment, because they're building up, and they're trying to resolve it, and finally one person gets absolute clarity, and the situation resolves in favor of the nonviolent person. But let's not use the term that casually. Usually it refers to a major campaign that's jostling, and now it reaches climax. Okay, so the next item was the Fellowship of Reconciliation, aka International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Just for your information, it was founded in 1914 when an Englishman and a German named Schaltz were coming back from a meeting in probably in The Hague, and they got off the train in Cologne, and they heard the news that the war had been declared. And they, in a famous moment, they stood facing each other on Bahnsteig 7 Kölner Bahnhof, platform 7 of the Cologne train station, where I myself stood about 3 years ago. Had a moment of silence for this event. They shook hands and they said, "We will never let this war separate us as friends." And that was the beginning of the Internationale Versöhnungsbund, or the International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Now, why it shows up on your exam, there is something that is probably qualitatively different about the FOR as opposed to almost any other peace organization that might show up in our course, and that is that it has been around since 1914. The rest of them, like I mentioned to you, Berkeley Students for Peace, who performed an act of nonviolent interposition almost spontaneously and was very successful, as most of them are. I think the tenure of the Berkeley Students for Peace was about 4 months. So now why am I making a fuss about the long duration of FOR? What's been one of the besetting problems in the peace movement? Catherine?
It seems that a lot of peace movements are set up and then whenever they accomplish what they set out to do, then or they don't.
Yes. Yeah, that's the big problem, that these movements, if they are even movements and not just campaigns or uprisings, they arise in response to a problem, and they either solve the problem or they don't, and then they go home. And now there's a difficulty with this, and that is that you have to reinvent the wheel every time there's a problem. And there's a tremendous advantage to continuity, and the peace movement has lacked continuity very badly. So because we have one organization that has been hanging in there for us, the other probably being the Society of Friends, because it's been around for even longer, and though it is not a peace group specifically, it works on every aspect of peace development. But in terms of peace groups per se, I think IFOR is probably the longest running peace game that we've got, and that helps. It's not just a number, it's not just something to put in Ripley's Book of Records. It means that you learn stuff and you accumulate wisdom and you can improve, as opposed to just constantly reinventing yourself. So one day the director of FOR, US FOR, was on a train with somebody, fell into a casual conversation with this person, told him that he was part of FOR and they were looking for some office space, and the guy said, oh, take my house. And he had this huge mansion on the banks of the Hudson in Nyack, New York. He was looking for somebody to donate it to, gave it to this fellow, and I went and visited there a few years ago, and I was standing in the living room, and there was a little 3x5 card on the mantelpiece, and I was looking at it. So Richard Dietz, who's my friend I was visiting, said, go ahead, have a look. So I picked it up, and it was an admission card, somebody wanted to pay his money, subscription, that's what I'm looking for, subscription to the FOR by a person named Martin Luther King Jr. with a $25 check to join it. So it's not, I would not call it a TPNI organization, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. It's much broader than that. It's a, I see looks of concern on some faces here. But the main thing to know about it is that this is our one shot of really having some continuity in the peace movement on the organizational level. Otherwise, things just keep reinventing and reinventing themselves. Okay, now, there was some confusion also about parallel institutions, and I think I didn't talk about it very much, so let me say a little bit more about it now. It's mentioned by George Lakey, of course, that's where we get the step 4 should be step 1 motto, but the importance of parallel institutions is that if you build them strongly enough, it makes it immensely easier to get rid of the institutions to which they are parallels that you don't like. In other words, okay, the state, let's take the Palestinian example. The Israelis shut down Palestinian schools whenever they feel like it. So instead of saying, oh, you've shut us down, we're helpless, we have no school to go to, you start a little school in the basement of your house or in the back of the police station or wherever. And that's a parallel institution, which you can immediately see it breaks your dependence on the state. So the state, or whatever is holding you down, can no longer say, do what we want, or we'll shut off your blah, blah. You say to them, go ahead, shut it off. We've got our own blah, blah, thank you. There's I don't know if any of you saw Riley, Ace of Spies. I don't know why we happened to pick this one television series to show at the ashram, but there's something about Riley that we liked. So there's a scene in Riley, Ace of Spies where Stalin is asking one of his henchmen about a particular group, and he's asking, what is this group doing? And the henchman says, oh, they have these meetings and they plan stuff. And the benevolent dictator says, what sort of stuff do they plan? And he says, oh, well, hey, they're sort of setting up a parallel government. You're like a Model UN, and just kill them. And has them all executed immediately, because Stalin recognizes, and we should also, from our point of view, that setting up a parallel institution immediately delegitimizes the state, or whoever it is had the original set, and also breaks your dependency on them. Without that dependency, they have no hold on you unless it's a benevolent sort of institution that you bought into in the first place. Unless it's the finest Congress that money can buy, for example, as Greg Palast has said. That was a joke, by the way. There's a story from one of the great spiritual teachers in the 19th century in India, Sri Ramakrishna, trying to explain how people can rapidly take to spiritual practice when it's the right time for them to do it, and it's nearly impossible when it's not yet the right time. And he says, look at this palm tree. There are lots of palm trees in India. Here's this palm frond. It's been there for a while. You want to pull that frond off the palm tree. It's going to, 10 strong men would not be able to do it. You know, it has all these fibers running down into the trunk. It's on there. You cannot get it free. But the instant that a new green frond emerges, the old frond turns around and drops away by itself. So that's the power of parallel institutions. And it's kind of the, what should we say, it's the jewel in the crown of constructive program. And some of you thought that these were just institutions that sprang into existence and that they do these casual functions. No, you can build them. You can plan them. And you can actually replace the government with your own government. That's the power of it. Okay. I'm going to keep moving along unless I see a hand shoot up. The next is person power. The attribution, blush. This is my term. It's, huh? No, I invented Gall term. No, no. Where is it? Actually, TPNI and person power are 2 items on your list that were part of a set. Some people thought that Hildegard Gelsmeyer was part of a set with Jean Meyer. Namely, they're a married couple, no, not pareja, but that's not the kind of set that I meant. It's perfectly okay if you don't mention him. So that leaves us with person power and TPNI, and I'll get to that in a minute. But person power is technically part of a set with people power and state power. People power, I don't know who came up with that phrase, but it's usually attached to the Philippine insurrection in 1986. It was coined as a contrast to an alternative to state power. And that's about as far as strategic nonviolence tends to go. And if you read Jonathan Schell's new book, I can't remember the name of it, but he talks about the other superpower, right? The world at this point in time, poor world, has one superpower, which is a large country lying to the north of Mexico somewhere. But his point was there is another superpower, and that is the world's people. So what he has done is raise people power to the global level, which is entirely appropriate. After spring break, we'll be talking about globalism and how nonviolence fits into it, or tries not to. But here you have this polar opposition, and a friend of mine, Houston Smith, has often said the universe can count higher than 2. And sometimes when you see polar oppositions, it shuts down large parts of reality. So I like to come in and break up polar oppositions and throw on a third item. That's part of my self-designated job description. So I came up with person power, but while you're at it, it doesn't just break up the duality. Now, principled nonviolence accepts the existence of both of these, but it's primarily based on person power. And it is a form of power. Some of you were saying it's, you talk about a single individual can be committed, which is true. And then you went on to say the importance of person power is if you can sum up a lot of person powers, you have people power. But my point is rather that all forms of power ultimately emerge from person power, from the power of an individual. And you can look at it this way. When we were talking incidentally last semester about mirror neurons and stuff, that is an example of how we're picking up how person power gets generated in an individual. Let's look at it this way. the power of the state is very impressive, but the minute enough people withdraw their assent from that power, it disappears. I mean, one day, if Germany is divided into two countries, you have this huge wall, you will be shot instantly if you try and walk across that space, at Checkpoint Charlie or wherever, and one day later, people are out there with crowbars pulling the thing down. Gene Sharp and the whole long tradition of political scientists that talks about withdrawal of consent, it's absolutely right as far as it goes. And it does mean that the power of the state can disappear overnight. People power, which is a collective power, kind of the effervescence of the crowd thing, it can also dissipate when the people disperse. I look at this, one of the most powerful, from various points of view, one of the most powerful episodes in the history of nonviolence is the Rosenstrasse prison demonstration. It lasted for one weekend, and by Monday morning there was nothing left. But person power is ineradicable. It is there. It's basically what keeps you alive, really, mobilized into a higher force and the love of your fellow beings and so forth. And as they say in the old song, Die Gedanken sind frei, you get to think what you want, you get to feel what you want. People can do things to your body, but they cannot get at person power. They can't change it. So in a way, I'm using this little stepwise thought process to illustrate that person power is fundamental to the other sides. Okay. Now, any questions about person power? Because this is really something that's quite, yeah, John? A fast is a way that a person is using his or her power. Yeah, is using his or her hold on other people on various levels to create change, yeah, and to manifest absolute independence from the system. Yeah, so I would say fast is an example or an implementation of the inherent power in an individual. And I think the whole change in growth in understanding nonviolence in the last, about 20 years has been uncovering person power, if you will. Okay, so the next was this Tagalog expression, alay dangal, and alay means to offer, and dangal means dignity. And many of you remember that, and that was very nice. But there's something, a couple other things could be said about it, and not everybody got them. One is, and I think I made a fuss about this, that in the world's vocabulary about nonviolence, this is almost the only positive term that I am aware of. I've taken a look at about 15 or 20 different words for nonviolence in different languages, and almost all of them attempt to be a literal translation of ahimsa, and they come out sounding negative in the respective language, which ahimsa did not actually do in Sanskrit. So, but to offer dignity is a rare positive expression. For example, in Arabic, as far as I know, there are two terms that are current, and Ahmed isn't here today. You heard about Ahmed going to LA, Marcella? Okay. Ahmed isn't here, but there's a term le'uf, which means non-violence, but they also use the term sumud, or patience, endurance, something like that. So alay dangal is a rare positive term for nonviolence, and we should be very happy about that, celebrate it, put it in our midterms, identify it correctly, and so forth. The other thing to be said about it is, this question of dignity is, for Gandhi, it was just primary, and often we overlook it. We overlook it when we insult people whose minds we are trying to change, if we're even trying to change their minds, as opposed to just make them feel bad. But I remember having this discussion with Dan Ellsberg. It's the second or third famous name I've dropped so far this morning. Let's see how many we can rack up. The peace movement was all, even the free speech movement, for example, people would get up and use their free speech to say insulting things about, say, a dean or an administrator, not realizing that when you bring down the dignity of another person, you compromise your own. Not realizing now on the strategic level that when you do that, you alienate that person in the most effective way that you can possibly do that. Carol Gilligan is another famous name. She's part of a set with Harold Gilligan. Harold Gilligan is a psychiatrist who has studied really, really violent criminals, serial killers and stuff like that, the kind of people that Marshall Rosenberg had to talk to in that little story. Did I tell you that story? Yeah, talking to this person who killed 7 people. Yeah, last semester. Okay, well, I'll get around to it when we talk about something else. But Gilligan, as a psychiatrist, has studied these people for 2 decades, came to the conclusion that the one most effective predictor of violent behavior is the lack of dignity with which one was treated in one's youth. So this is very powerful on the strategic level, and on the principle level, it's very deeply healing, and that's why I think that the Filipino people did a really smart thing in latching onto this concept. It hasn't stuck, and maybe that should be your project. We can go back to form the alay dangal radio station or something like that. Oh, I don't know what book he has written, but his name is Gilligan, Harold Gilligan. Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to do it in English, though, if that's okay with you. Le'uf means nonviolence, and sumud means patience or endurance, which is pretty good, but you could be enduringly bad also, so there's no way you can offer a person bad dignity, but endurance by itself is like close to, but not exactly at the center. Okay, we're getting along very well. TPNI is part of a set. That's another one of our set terms. And what is it a set with and why? Remember that? CBD, civilian-based defense and third-party nonviolent intervention. And what are they a set of? What are these two things? What do they do for us? Sorry, Catherine? I would say that TPNI